I think that there is room for growth and experimentation. And as I said before, I stopped shooting for other people. I probably am guilty of that. I did when I was in my early days as a photographer. But you need to grow and find your own path, and don't look for that visually performative shot, because, we can all go out and get it. And I don't think it's going to help you in the long run, really. I think you need to sort of sit back, talk to yourself and think what appeals to you, and find some stuff that isn't going to gain a lot of traction and isn't going to be that outstanding on Instagram, but it means more to you. And when you do find that, you're going to keep going down that path and you're going to find better work in the long run. So don't worry about performance, worry about substance.
So welcome back, everybody, to a new episode of Eyeshot 50mm. And today we're sitting down with Mark Davidson. Mark is an Australian street photographer whose work transforms the city into a space of tension, atmosphere, and emotional uncertainty as well. Through the use of sharp light, flash, and a deeply instinctive way of looking, his photograph questions what street photography can still say today in a genre already full of myth, cliches, and expectations. Mark, thank you so much for being with me today, and welcome.
Lucrezia, thank you so much for inviting me. That was a lovely intro. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And just before we start, I just want to leave a very, very small message to everybody who's watching to keep liking and keep subscribing, because what's a very small click to you, it means the world for us. And since a couple of months now, you can find all our interviews on all major broadcasting platforms. Mark, now the fun begins. And the very first question I want to ask you relates to your origins and how you started street photography, because you began taking photography seriously in a way relatively recent, in 2019, if I'm not mistaken. And the very first question I have for you is, do you feel that starting later gave you some kind of like different pressure or kind of urgency compared to perhaps other photographers?
Yeah, I absolutely think it did, to be honest. So, as you say, I started pretty late in life. I was in my late 30s. Before that, so I work as a radio producer as my day job. I've been doing that a long time, for about 15 to 20 years, really. And before all that, I was an athlete. So before photography, I probably identified more as an athlete. I played a lot of AFL football, which is Australian rules football. I was a runner. I still have the 100-meter record at my when I was 13 at high school. So yeah, I still brag about that. And I played basketball, and I did all that for a long time. And then I discovered alcohol and cigarettes, and that all went by the wayside, and I stopped playing sport. And so I was in a band as well for a long time at high school. So I was a drummer in a band, and that was great. We played a lot of gigs in clubs and pubs, and it was so much fun. We recorded 2 albums as a band, but that all came to an end because when I went to university, we were still playing a little bit, and I had a cat. And one day the cat woke me up. She'd broken her leg. I don't know how she did it. I know, but I took her to the vet, and I had to get her, operated on. And the vet said it was going to cost $1,000, and I didn't have $1,000 back then. So I sold my drum kit, paid for the operation, and then took her home, nursed her back to health. And 2 weeks later, she ran away. So I didn't have a cat or a drum kit. So sorry. This is a long way of saying I got into photography so much later in life after than that. So I was really, creative, I guess, as a kid. After the sport, playing music, I was always dabbling in photography, but never really taking it seriously. And it wasn't until I went on a work trip in 2017. As part of my radio job, I went to the Philippines with a load of journalists, and there was a photographer there named Connor, and we actually shared a room. And I took my camera. I was taking photos, but, just mucking around, taking travel snaps. And his infectious passion for photography really inspired me. And I sort of nagged the crap out of him for the whole trip, asking him, photography-related questions, gear-related questions. And when I got back to Australia, I'm like, you know what, I'm going to give this a go. And I did a really short 10-week course, just a night course. And after that had finished, I thought, well, what am I going to do now? And I just fell into street photography because what do? You just go out of your house and take photos. And yeah, I absolutely fell head over heels with it, and I've never really stopped since.
I love this. I love this whole introduction. I'm sorry about the cat. That's such a
Yeah, me too.
joke as well.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's interesting because, many photographers speak about photography as something they were born to do in a way. And your story, as you said, is a little bit different, more like something you found at the right moment in a way. What did photography give you personally that you felt was missing before?
Such a great question. I think the answer for that is because I work on a breakfast radio program, so it's 3 hours of live radio. We don't prepare anything in advance. It's completely all done on the fly, and it's so hectic. And afterward, I just need a chance to decompress. And street photography gives me that, because I have to get up early in the morning. It's I get up at 2 a.m., which is quite ridiculous. But afterwards, I can just let it all go and forget about the day and whatever stresses we had. And if we didn't get that interview, or if we didn't, if the show didn't go, fantastically, that it didn't matter because I could go out on the street, it would just completely exit my mind, and I just focus on the world around me and being present and capturing the city that I live in, Melbourne. So I think it really just gives me that chance to de-stress and decompress, and I think it's a really good counterbalance to my day job.
And when you started looking seriously at street photography, what did you feel more inspired from? Like, what were your influences? Maybe not just even photographic. How did you develop a little bit your style?
Yeah, so when I first started, I didn't know anything about street photography. I hadn't really heard that term before. I guess we all sort of stumble across people we like on Instagram and online, and that's how I really started. So I did the cliche thing of light and shadow, and but that was really good for learning my camera settings and learning how to use the camera, learning how to see. So I don't regret that period of my photography at all. But I did move on pretty quickly from that sort of harsh light, angular light, shadow, all that stuff. And then I just started my process of experimentation. So I shoot a lot on film now, pretty much predominantly on film, but it's been a bit of a gradual process. So, the light and shadow was great. I was lucky enough to get some recognition in competitions, and that really gave me some, I guess, a bounce in my step to go out and pursue this a bit more seriously. So after that, I sort of picked up the flash because that was really resonating with me at the time. The city that I live in, Melbourne, it's gone through a bit of a period of change. There's, unfortunately, it's we're sort of beset by a lot of crime in Melbourne at the moment, and it's never sort of been like that for as long as I've lived here. I lived in London for a while, and I came back to Melbourne just because I love the city and it's the place where I grew up and I loved it. But the city's changing. It's not as happy-go-lucky and as positive as it once was. So I felt that the flash really gave me that opportunity to capture the city in the way that I was feeling and the way that I was responding to the energy of people on the streets. So that's where photography really changed for me, when I sort of left the light and shadow stuff behind, picked up the flash, and I've sort of been doing that ever since.
Okay. Because as we were saying before, as I was kind of like introducing you before, you belong to a generation of photographers who came to street photographer when that genre was already kind of full in a way. Masters, festival, Instagram accounts, books everywhere, podcasts as well, competitions too. So very full of things. And how do you make honest work inside the language that knows already so much about itself?
I don't nowadays shoot in a traditionally street photography way, I don't think. And the way I keep it honest is just trust my instincts. So, now that I've been doing it for a longer period of time, I'm not trying to do it for anyone else's benefit. I'm not shooting for other people online. I'm just doing it for me. And the way I keep honest is just going out and feeling it from here. So if I want to go and take that photo, I go and take it, and I'm not sort of thinking about an audience or anything like that. So I think the best way to keep it honest is just to trust your gut and trust your instincts and have fun with it. That's the most important thing. We're all sort of doing it. I mean, not many street photographers make money from street photography. It's very rare. So you've just got to go out and have fun. And if you're not having fun, I don't think maybe go and do something else. But I honestly, I just think the best way to keep it honest is just to be true to you and shoot what you want to shoot. And, if something doesn't appeal to you, if you don't like shooting some element of street photography, don't do it. Don't do it for anyone else's benefit. And that's how I keep honest, I guess.
And when you look at contemporary street photography online in that sense, what do you feel we're seeing too much and too little?
Great question. I think
Tricky.
Yeah, I like seeing projects. I want to see more people's projects. I really respond to that. For example, I don't know if you classify him as a street photographer, I guess more documentary in the street fashion, but Jason Eskenazi, I think he's one of my favorite photographers, and his Wonderland series that he did, Black Garden, that really appeals to me. So I know it's difficult because we've all got jobs and we've all got lives, and you got to make money, and you can't just go off and take photos as much as we'd like to. But him doing that project over a decade, traipsing around Eastern Europe and just making a really astonishing body of work is something I want to see more, something I want to see more in my own work. I'm in a photography collective called Revoke, and we're very much project-based photographers. Everyone's sort of working on personal work. And that's the work that I really respond to. So yeah, I would like to see more of that. I want to see people's passions and what they're interested in and how they see the world through their projects. So that's something I like to see more of. Less is a tricky question.
Putting you on the spot.
Yeah, just we see so much of the same stuff, don't we? We're oversaturated. I think it's a good process to get off Instagram and don't be bombarded and don't feel like you're drowning in, work that can look samey. I think we all see, I don't mind people going out and copying when they're just starting, because I think it's a really good, it's helpful for your process. If you're learning the techniques and you're learning how to see the world and you see someone else's work and you think, I'd love to take a photo like that, go out and take it, go out and take it, copy it, but then don't keep doing that. Move on, shoot what feels natural to you, and don't get in this rut and cycle of copying other people.
Exactly. Like a lot of street photography feels very much visually effective nowadays,
Yes.
like with this
100%.
very strong light, strange gestures as well, these juxtapositions, complex compositions and everything. But I feel like not all of it is necessary in a way.
Yes. Yes.
For you, what is the difference between a successful image and a necessary one in your own way of doing photography, of course?
Yeah. So a successful image for me is just something that, it just hits me in the guts. I think it's only happened a couple of times with my own work, but when I get my, negatives and I scan them and look at them on the screen, sometimes I get this feeling of butterflies in my tummy, and I'm just like, yes, that actually worked. And it may have come from a mistake, it may have come from an accident, but I'm like, that is something, and that's something that I'm trying to achieve. And I just get this overwhelming just sensation in me going, this is what I want. And so I'm trying to get that feeling over and over again. It doesn't happen very much, but that's what I'm always striving for. And so yeah, successful image for me is just, and in other people's work, not so much my own, but if I see something and I'm like, how did they get there? How did they take that? How did this all come about? When we're asking questions and it's not an obvious frame and it's different, and I'm like, I want to talk to that photographer and know how they got in that situation. And those are the kind of successful images for me that where I'm asking questions and not knowing the answers.
I want to switch gears for a little bit and focus still on your work, but particularly your emotional territory in Melbourne in a way, because your work is deeply connected to where you live, but it also feels kind of like, at least for me, not such a natural portrait of the city that we would all expect from an Australian city and everything, the strong light. And in Life Was Good Here, I feel like there is, in this series you've done, there is a sense of the city that kind of feels like fractured. In a way, it gives me that sense of division somehow. When did you first feel that emotional shift in Melbourne? Because your street photography, it's kind of different from what we are used to in a way.
Well, no, thank you for saying. I take that as a huge compliment. So thank you so much. I think the shift for me came, I guess, as it does naturally for many other people during COVID. The city was, it was a bit on a knife edge. I was lucky enough when Melbourne was one of the most lockdown cities in the world. So we went through these huge periods of being confined to our houses. I was lucky because I worked in radio and I had to go to work. And I live close enough to the city where I work that I can just walk home. And that was fantastic. It gave me a bit of a valve release, if you like. And I would photograph on the way home. Obviously, there weren't any people on the street, but when we did finally come out of those lockdowns, the city had changed. So it's around about 2022, protests began. People were getting angry. People were more divided, politically divided and ideologically divided, and that came through on the streets so much. So people would protest on the city every weekend, and it was just becoming a point of fracture, as you say, and the city did feel fractured. And I wanted to capture that, and I didn't think I could do it in a traditional manner. So this is around the time that I started shooting film, and it was a real period of growth for me. And I felt that my black and white work is how I wanted to capture the city, that anger, that aggression, that fractured nature, as you say. I just felt that worked for me, using the techniques that I do and not capturing it in a traditional manner as I had before, pre-2022.
Because many classic street photographers are kind of like drawn to humor, absurdity, visual play, and everything. Instead, it's very much more interested in pressure, unease, and emotional intensity. It's not also such an easy thing to portray in a photograph as well. When you're out in the street, what are you exactly looking for? Are there recurring elements or feelings, or what do you feel?
It definitely is a mood.
It's a mood, yeah.
Yeah, look, I am a pretty happy person. Like, the radio program that I work on is, it's very entertainment based, and we all have a laugh, and we're quite creative people, but that doesn't come through in my work at all. I don't shoot humor on the street. I know a lot of people do it well, and I love that other people can do it. I don't see that. Juxtaposition, jokes, play on the street is not something I've ever been good at. It's not something I'm interested in. I am trying to create that mood, that tension, that unease, and that's what I'm looking for. So it is harsh light in a sense, and it's just people's attitude and the way they carry themselves on the street. And it's kind of a somber thing. I know it's a little bit depressing, but that's what really attracts me on the street. I don't know where that comes from. I mean, obviously I'm feeling the vibe of the city, but I don't know why I'm drawn to that, but that's what I want to capture, that sort of dispirited nature that I see on the streets. So
I love that. It's always like this, the most fun and laughing and loving people as well sometimes have that really good eye on the more tension approach to the street. So that definitely explains a lot. Now I want to ask you, because you live in such a big city as well, full of people, strangers and everything. Nowadays the public is much more aware that an image can travel instantly, be posted, awarded, be printed as well, of the subjects we're portraying. At the same time, there is still this argument, I photographed it in public, so it's good. I can do it, and it's so it can be photographed. So do you think the meaning of a candid photograph needs to be changed, has changed, or what, in terms of privacy and ethics of the subjects we're all photographing?
Something I have been thinking about a lot. I know a lot of my peers, my friends, have stopped photographing people in public because they do feel that people's attitudes are changing. And there may come a time where taking candid photos in public will be difficult. It's the public don't really get what we do sometimes. You know, they question it, and they're right to. I mean, before we got into photography, we'd probably think the same thing. If someone took a photo of us, we would be suspicious or curious about where it's going to end up. And I think explaining that we're not, a lot of my photographs, there's no recognizable people. I mean, obviously there is, you can't help it at times, but I think that this conversation is going to evolve and it's going to continue. And we always cite the example of Germany, where it's really hard to take candid photos. It's not in Melbourne now. It's still, you don't get many people questioning what you're doing. But I think that will change in time. I think we're getting to this stage where people are so protective of their image and their privacy that taking photos is going to be hard in a candid fashion, which is such a shame because we need to document these times. We can't have an endpoint where we're no longer photographing the public space. I think that'd be such a shame. It'd be such a loss to society. And I hope that doesn't come, but I feel that we're heading in that direction. And, you know, when you explain to people that there are hundreds of security cameras, you know, pointing at you all the time,
Doorbells.
and
Yeah.
doorbells, exactly, all of this, and the right to privacy is going, I think, going to become a huge issue. Will it affect what we do? Maybe. I think so. So I think the message is just get out and do it now while we still can.
Exactly. Make the most of the time you have. And
Yeah.
for you, where do you draw the line between observing someone and taking something from them?
I would always want to photograph in a manner that I would be happy to be photographed myself. So I'm not looking to embarrass anyone. You know, we talk about homeless all the time in the street photography world. I think being out on the street a lot, I photograph pretty much within, you know, I guess 6-block radius. That's my sort of loop that I do the whole time. And you get to know people on the street. And Melbourne has a bit of an issue with homelessness at the moment, but you know, we see the same people and we talk to the same people all the time. I don't tend to photograph them, not because I don't think you should. I mean, they are people who live on the street, deserve to be photographed too, I think. You know, they're humans, and you know, we talk to them all the time as street photographers, but only if, I guess, the occasion affords it. I wouldn't do it if someone's in distress, and or even, you know, if they're not homeless, if there's a couple having an argument, you know, sometimes I don't want to intrude on that either. I mean, a lot of photographers would, and I don't judge or begrudge anyone who does that. But I just, yeah, in this world where everything ends up online, I do have that in the back of my mind, to be honest. Like, I don't, I'm trying to photograph the city as a mood rather than an individual moment. Like, obviously I will grab moments if they're there, but I would only want to steal a moment if I think that it's going to aid my storytelling and my depiction of the city. I'm not going to get it just because it's a cheap and easy shot, or it's, you know, going to cause a bit of a laugh online. I won't do that. Or even if I do it, I won't post it. So yeah, there is a line for me. I don't exactly know what that is. It's not hard and fast. I probably break my own rules all the time, but but yeah, there definitely is a line, I would say.
Okay, so have you ever, I guess the answer to my next question is yes, but I want to hear it from you. Have you ever took a photo and then kind of like regret it and not publish it because of like ethical reasons for you? You're not the type of photographer that would go and look for the visual joke or anything like that, but did that ever happen to you?
Great question. Nothing's springing to mind, but I'm sure it's happened over the years. You know, I can't recall. I mean, I don't tend to post a lot online anyway. I get a lot of stick, and a lot of people ask where my photos are because I don't tend to share much these days. So there probably is a lot in my archive that I would consider not publishable. But generally, no. I think, well, the other day there was Flinders Street Station, which is the main station in Melbourne. And if you ever come to Melbourne, go there, you'll run into a lot of street photographers. That's the honeypot, that's the mecca that we all are drawn to. And there was a guy a couple of weeks ago who was the most drunkest person I've ever seen in my life. He was I don't think he was necessarily, you know, homeless or anything, but he was just absolutely paralytic, and he would fall over and smack his head against the concrete. And I, you know, I think some people took a photo of that, but we just wanted to go and help him and see if he was okay. I did capture a tender moment of him where someone was trying to help him and embrace them and hug them. And I did catch that moment. Would I publish that? Probably, but he was in a state of just overwhelming drunkenness and he couldn't
Yeah,
function. But I I don't know if he'd be okay with that photo being online. It's a good question, but I do like the photo. It's a real sort of moment. It's, as I said, him embracing a stranger that he just met. And, I took it with flash and it came up okay. But yeah, he wasn't in a great state. So I don't know. I don't know.
it's
Well, I
tough.
guess we'll
Yeah.
see. Yeah, it is tough.
Absolutely. And speaking of flash, you often use flash, and flash can make a photograph feel very immediate, dramatic, also confrontational
Mm,
sometimes in a
yeah.
way. But your use of flash, it's not does not only feel stylistic in a way. What does flash allow you to say that other techniques don't about the temperature in the street?
Yeah, you're right. You're so right. It can be very aggressive, and I
It
don't want to.
screams, I took a picture,
Yeah,
it truly, like, everybody would be,
it
it's,
does.
there's courage as well, somehow.
Yeah, absolutely. It's as you say, it does scream that you've taken a photo, and it can upset people. I've never, to be honest, had that much trouble of all the time that I've been using Flash. Most people will be like, startled, then you have a chat with them and it's fine. But to me, I use it because it captures that energy that I was talking about before, that mood, that discontent, that disquiet. It makes the city that I live in resonate with me more using that flash. It's Melbourne can be a bit dreary as well. It's very dark and it doesn't rain a lot, but it drizzles a lot and it can be very gloomy at times. And the flash cuts through that, obviously, and it introduces energy. And I just respond to that look, really. And it just sort of, the way I photograph, I think it really tells the story that I want to tell of Melbourne. And luckily, I haven't had that much issue with it. I can't really recall anyone who's got too upset with me. And early days, I was probably a lot bolder. I remember being in, where was I? Oslo. And I really got up in someone's face and took a photo, a flash photo, and he didn't even care. And I'm just like, wow, okay, you can get away with
Love
this
it.
if you want, but it is aggressive, and there are, I guess, ethical issues around that. You don't want to obviously injure anyone. You don't want them to fall over and hurt themselves. But thankfully, that's never happened, and I'm sure that doesn't happen very often. But yeah, it can be quite a metaphorical punch in the face, really. So it's you got to be careful.
Absolutely, absolutely. And in terms of post productions and editing and everything, what is your post production approach? Do you try to keep your photos as raw as possible, or do you see post production as part of translating a moment that you lived?
So now I'm shooting a lot of film. Probably 95% of my photos are on film these days, and the post production is pretty minimal. We digitize them for online purposes, obviously, and I don't do a lot really. I try and keep it as obviously I shoot into really heavy light, so I'm going to have to adjust the contrast and the exposure at some time points. But other than that, I try and keep it pretty minimal. I want to be true to what I felt on the street, and I don't want to manipulate it if I can help it. So I won't do anything that everything I capture, you know, on the film stays there. I don't remove anything, obviously. I don't add anything, of course. But yeah, I try and keep it pretty minimal and just, I guess, try and make the photo that I felt on the street, capture that in camera. And look, a lot of the time you're failing. Like, because I'm experimenting with film, I'm coming back with stuff that just doesn't work at all. And if I get one shot a roll, that will do me. I'm happy with that. And it's an expensive process, burning through all
Yes.
that film and not getting any results. But yeah, I do. I am looking for that gut punch feeling that I described earlier. And a lot of the time that doesn't happen. So if the photo doesn't work, I'm not going to manipulate it. I'm not going to try and fashion something out of it. So I'll just leave it and move on and try and get something else.
And this choice of moving more towards the analog approach to photography, what does analog give you that digital cannot or does not? Because it has a completely different approach, right, to photography. Like you need to process it before seeing it before. It's not like so straightforward as the digital.
Yeah, 100% right. And I still feel like I'm really early on in that journey. There are a lot of photographers that are so gear focused and technically focused, and that's not me at all. It doesn't describe me. So, you know, I'm still finding my way with film. I love it because of the look. That look. I keep coming back to it, but it gives me that feeling on the street that I'm witnessing it and feeling, and that mood. And digital now, I don't think does that for me. With the flash, I tend to shoot in black and white, but obviously if I'm shooting digital, it does capture it in color. And it doesn't have that same look that I'm after. It warps the face a bit too much with when I'm using flash and a slow shutter speed. And I get it back on the computer. I'm like, I don't like that look. The film just looks so much warmer and nicer and more forgiving. And I just think that, yeah, it looks better. It looks better.
Totally fair. Totally fair. You co-host a podcast about street photography. You write about the genre and are active within the community. So has talking with so many photographers changed the way you understand the craft in general and perhaps your own work?
Absolutely, yes. We've had the privilege of speaking to some amazing photographers. As you would know, Lucrezia, like the people you've had on this series has been incredible. And I'm sure and people are so generous with their time and their stories. And I'm sure as a publisher yourself, you've learnt so much by speaking to people on this series. And it's the same for me. We've had some great photographers. Martin Parr was on, which was, just an eye-opener. And, I was actually pretty nervous to chat to him, but he was yeah, but he was fantastic and he was very generous. His advice actually was he just said, give up. Everything's been done on the street. You're never going to get any good work. Why are you even bothering? But but I guess his point was, if you're going to make it, if you really want to do this, do it with everything you got. And that's what I took out of that interview. So it was a privilege to speak to him. I think Jeremy Page, Eaten by Flowers, just the way he does his work is just so inspiring. He sort of similar to me. He photographs in a really small radius in his hometown of Los Angeles. And he's just going out all the time and not posting, but capturing so much of life on the street there and working towards a body of work. And I think he's been doing it 10 years, working on the same project, and he still says he's got 10 years more in him doing that. And I'm of the similar mindset. I think that I would love to do a book one day maybe, but I'm still working. I don't think it's there yet. It's not finished. And that's what I took out of the chat with Jeremy. You just got to keep going and think more long term. A lot of the photographers we speak to do think in these 5-10 year blocks. And so speaking with people on the podcast, it just taught me not to rush, not to be impatient, and just keep doing the work.
Great. I now, because we kind of like had the same kind of privilege, we work within the same in terms of podcasting and everything. I wanted to ask you this, and I'm so curious to know what you will say about this. Do you think that this ecosystems of workshops, podcasts, festivals, Instagram pages, in a way have created a very active global community, but what has this ecosystem given street photographer that's damaged something?
Hopefully it hasn't damaged photographers too much. I think my advice to people getting into street photography now is just be supportive, of the community. I think that that's such an important element of what we do. Let's be honest. So street photography and even photography more general is such a niche pursuit. Like the public don't tend to engage with photography like they should. I honestly think that as an art form, it's incredible. And The public, they love going to movies, they enjoy painting, music, of course, but photography sometimes gets left by the wayside. And I think as a community, we need to really get around each other and support each other and lift each other up. And when you see someone do well and get some success, don't be envious of that at all. Lift them up, be supportive, and I guess just don't be an asshole. And I think these photography festivals are really great. Living in Melbourne, I can't get to a lot of them because they're obviously in Europe a lot of the time, but I think they're fantastic. You know, Photography competitions are a bit of a necessary evil. They are good for the community. You shouldn't get too sidetracked and sucked into that world, I don't think, but they do fund these festivals. And I think if that's the way that we can get everyone around, put some work up on the wall, hear some speakers, chat, have a beer, talk photography, I think they're so invaluable and so important to what we do as a community. So I think they're fantastic. And podcasts the same. People, talk to me all the time and just say, we just love hearing other people's stories. And we live in a world where you don't get that much exposure with photography. Like, yes, Instagram, and you can put your stuff online, but that's kind of dwindling. And Instagram doesn't have that impact and that reach that it once did. And listening to someone's story and hearing them on a podcast allows them to get their work and their message out to a wider world. And I think they're great. So yeah, people should do more of them, like what you're doing now.
I've read something that you've written about whether street photography has lost its soul. And I want to talk about this. Could you explain this to me?
The reason I wrote that blog post was in response to a YouTube video. I can't remember the photographer's name. I should. It escapes me, but he's sort of more of a documentary travel photography in the sort of National Geographic vein, and he said, look, street photography, it's just a carbon copy of what's come before, and there's no experimentation, and it's too much copying was his point, I think. And he's just said it's completely lost its soul. And I wrote a blog piece responding to that. And I do think that, the masters that came before us, they worked hard. They didn't post a lot. The work that you see of theirs exists in books, and it's some of their best work. And you don't see a lot of their offcuts, you don't see the stuff that didn't make publication. And I think that because we share so much of our work online, it can feel like we're drowning in a tide of mediocrity. And that is probably influencing the way we think of street photography. So, I mean, I don't mind being called a street photography. Other people may say my work is not street photography, and that's fine. I don't mind. But I just think that I don't think it's lost its soul. I think it's still there. I think that we just have to work harder to find it.
Okay, interesting. Very, very interesting. And do you think, final question on this section, let's say, do you think that online culture has made photographers more visually educated or just more visually performative?
I love that question. Yeah, maybe. I think that's probably right. There is a bit of visual performance out there at the moment. Yeah, 100%. I think it's sometimes people go for that easier shot that they know that will get a bigger response. And that exists in the competition space and the online space. I think you don't want to get sucked into that world of just getting a cheap response. I think that there is room for growth and experimentation. And as I said before, I stopped shooting for other people. I probably am guilty of that. I did when I was in my early days as a photographer, but I just think it gives you such a disservice. You need to grow and find your own path, and don't look for that visually performative shot, because we can all go out and get it, and I don't think it's going to help you in the long run. Really, I think you need to sort of sit back, talk to yourself, and think what appeals to you, and find some stuff that isn't going to gain a lot of traction and isn't going to be, that outstanding on Instagram, but it means more to you. And when you do find that, you're going to keep going down that path and you're going to find better work in the long run. So, yeah, don't worry about performance, worry about substance.
Exactly. I love this about substance. That's exactly what I was looking for. You've received, as you said before, quite a lot of recognitions from several street photography festivals and awards. What did that validation change for you, if anything?
Probably not much, to be honest.
Love it.
It was nice. It felt good. Yeah, it was great. I was lucky enough to win the Aussie Street Photography competition in Australia, and because that was my home country, I was so stoked that I won that. And some of the judges, Jesse Marlowe, who I look up, and he's a iconic Melbourne street photographer, and and Norel Audio, who's just incredible work. Obviously, her works that she's done in Australia is just fantastic. So getting that validation from those kind of photographers was super inspiring, and it did give me a little kick along, and it just makes you want to go out and photograph more, which is the point, I think. So if it's kicking you out the door, motivating you, it is a good thing. But I don't think that you should be too downhearted if your work doesn't get recognized in these competitions, because it is a bit of a lotto at the end of the day. And it's I think that there's value in failure as well. So if you do enter some competitions and you don't get anywhere, use that as motivation. If that's what you want to do, if you want to get your work seen in competitions and you miss out, it doesn't have to be a street photography competition. It can be an art-based photography competition, whatever your goals are. If you do miss out, don't give up and just, drop the bottom lip and be upset. Use it as inspiration to go out and find something visually interesting for the next year. But in terms of what it gives you in the short run, probably not much. It gives you something to put on the CV, I guess, at the end of the day. And you might use that, in future if you want to do something with photography. But, it's probably it's overrated, I think, definitely.
Interesting. And what is one thing in street photography that is said all the time, but that you secretly disagree with? Secretly,
Wow.
speaking to thousands of people.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a great question. Because there are a lot of cliches in street photography, aren't there? Oh man, that's amazing. What would I say that I secretly disagree with? Maybe, well, I don't know if this is controversial, but layering is the be all end all. I think that, people, they think a layered shot is automatically incredible when sometimes it isn't. It's just, you've got your foreground, your background, your middle ground, but there's nothing really happening. I think that people will, I guess, try it. They will say that, layering is what everyone should be striving for. I don't know. I don't know if I do agree with that.
No,
I'm
I
just
like
trying to think. That's
this.
probably a bad
Yeah, it's
example, to be honest with
interesting.
you.
Because there's also no. Go ahead.
Yeah. I mean,
Because I wanted to ask you if there was one rule in street photography that you think should probably disappear as well. Maybe reformulating it like this could be.
I think rules in street photography are so. I mean, we talk obviously about the cropping stuff. I think you can obviously crop your image if you want. I don't see any reason why you shouldn't be able to do that. Rules in street photography, I think, are just ridiculous. I mean, just what are we doing? We're taking photos candidly in public. And why do you want to set rules around that so it qualifies as a street photo? I don't know. I mean, yes, of course, post-production, I think there are rules that you should adhere to. But as far as rules as, if you want to set up a shot, do it. Like, not stage a shot, but if you want to ask someone for a portrait, that's fine. Like, people get so hung up about, street portraits and whether it's street photography. Who cares? Like, who cares? Like, just if you want to stop someone, you think they're visually interesting, you want to have an interaction and talk to them, do it. Like, what's the harm in that? And, I think you shouldn't be too hung up about whether you call that a street photo or not, further down the line. It doesn't matter. We're all photographers. We all want to get engaging, interesting photographs. And I just think that rules are silly on the street. Just go out and do whatever feels intuitive and instinctive to you. I think that's the most important.
And if you had to give one piece of advice to a young photographer that wants to start with street photography, what would you say?
Look, I think we say it all the time, but it's just consistency, showing up, going out on the street as much as you can, taking bad photos. Taking bad photos is the best path to growth. Absolutely. So it's just not to, if you really want to get somewhere in street photography, you got to put in the hours, you got to put in the steps. There's no shortcut really. I mean, you can't just do it, 5 minutes once a week. It's not going to work for you. So it's just patience. It's just at man hours. It's going out in the street and doing it all the time. So unfortunately, it's street photography is hard. Like, we're not portrait photographers. We're not wildlife photographers or nature photographers. We can't set anything up on the street. We have to obey the conditions, the light, and you're going to go out and fail a lot. And I don't think there's any way around that. I think you have to embrace the failure. The failure is good for you long term. And I say street photography is hard because, it doesn't get the dues it really deserves. Candid photography out in the photography world. There is a lot of insular based projects that people do these days. They'll go out and shoot a personal project where it's, very self-reflective. I guess street photography or candid photography or lifestyle photography, whatever you want to call it, is the opposite of that. It's looking outward, and the elements and the people aren't going to play by your rules. You have to go out and capture whatever you see in front of you, and most of the time that's going to be crap. Not going to be good. It's not going to be visually interesting. So go out and just embrace it, and I guess, do it as much as you can.
Exactly. Do as much as you can. Mark, I thank you so, so much. It passed so fast and it was so interesting. I hope I made you feel comfortable as much as you made me feel comfortable. And I had quite a lot of fun as well. We laughed quite a lot. So I thank you so much for being with me today.
Yeah, me too. Lucrezia, thank you so much. It was a pleasure meeting you, and thanks for the invitation. I really enjoyed this.
Please. And I hope one day to see you in Italy, or I guess in Melbourne very soon. I would love to. Would love to.
I'd love to. I'd love to meet you. Yeah, that'd be fantastic. So when I'm in Europe, I'll definitely hit you up.
Yes, hit us up. Absolutely. And just a very small message before we say goodbye, to keep again liking and subscribing, because what's a very small click to you, it means the world for us to keep bringing you content such as this one. Thank you so much, Mark, and see you soon.
Thank you. See you soon.